This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And if you could, please do me a favor and take a moment and leave a rating and review in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, doesn't matter. I would greatly appreciate it. And that feedback really helps get other listeners to the show. Also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to geekleader.com/tip and donate to the show. Thanks so much. All right, Geek Leaders, today I'm honored to have Krishna Bala on the show. He is a Senior Vice President for Proscia, and they are a leading provider of digital and computational pathology solutions. And we're going to talk about why that was so attractive to Krishna to come aboard, and what he's done in the past and how he got to where he is today. We're also talking a little bit about silos, communication, and breaking down those walls. So it's going to be a fun conversation. Anyway, with all that being said, Krishna, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. A real pleasure to be on the show here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, if you don't mind, just to lay some context for the conversation, tell the audience about your background and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, I'd love to share that. So I think I'm one of those who's had really two careers in one career. So I started my life in fiber optic networking, if you will, at Columbia University as a Ph.D. student. Eventually joined Bell Communications Research. And after several years, spun out a company with some of my colleagues there and started off as my first, I'd say, co-founder, CTO. Got a taste of entrepreneurship. We took that company public. So it was a lot of fun to build that up from really a vision all the way to something that created real value and products for customers there. About I'd say 12 years or so ago, I decided to sort of change my mission. I wanted to look at another mission-oriented field, but I decided I want to get to healthcare. And so I've been in healthcare about 12 years now. And I started off in a small company in New York City that was focused on building electronic healthcare records for the elderly, essentially for skilled nursing homes, home health, assisted living, that sort of arena there. I was head of engineering there. And, we grew that over a period of, I'd say, 7 to 8 year journey there, starting off as a small company, eventually merged with a few companies, got some private equity investment, grew it from single-digit millions to $100 million plus business. Very exciting to kind of go through the entire transition, and finally got acquired by a company called ResMed. It's a public company in the sleep apnea and pulmonary diseases space. So they wanted a software kind of group added to their vision and mission, if you will. So it was very exciting, and I was kind of doing well there. It was 3 years at the company at ResMed, and I thought, hey, I'm going to probably stay here forever is what my brain told me. But then the founders at Proscia reached out to me with their absolutely amazing, I'd say, vision to revolutionize pathology by digitizing everything in pathology and building a platform. It just spoke to me instantly. I was sold instantly. I love their vision. David, Coleman, and Nathan. I kind of came out of Hopkins and UPenn. They had they have sort of had their own journey through those institutions, and they built something where I would call a product. And they basically said, we want to now make it a platform. That's kind of where I come in. So I asked myself, what, it's very rare in life that you get a chance to revolutionize an entire field of medicine like this. Mm-hmm. So I'm very excited by this, and yet I am. I've been here a little less than 3 years now, just having a great time.
Wow, that's awesome. I think it's interesting because you talked about starting out in fiber optic and going from fiber optics to software engineering, which is very different. And, I've had a similar path where I worked for an ISP for 9 years, and I was over the GIS and all the laying the fiber in the ground. I'm not actually laying in the ground. Sorry, not at all with that part. Just the mapping of where it's laid in the ground. And also, I moved into software engineering there and worked at that company for a few more years, about 5 more years as a software engineering manager before, going past it. So that's an interesting shift there.
Yeah, it is actually. So, you take a piece of hardware, you have to wrap it around with some kind of software. So started embedded code, then eventually built that up the application stack, and eventually kind of go, hey, so this is fun, I can do this. And that's how I transitioned.
Yeah, cool. So real quick, you mentioned that, you guys are revolutionizing healthcare and, pathology part of it. How are you doing that?
Absolutely. I think this is a great question, John. And believe it or not, the science or the practice of pathology has kind of stayed with the microscope for about 150 years, right? So prior to this, it's typically, you can kind of imagine on the diagnostic side, where essentially someone goes and visits a physician oncologist and they take a biopsy sample, they send it back to a lab somewhere where basically these tissues are put on glass slides, and eventually a pathologist physician looks at it under a microscope, and that's pretty much it. That's been the mode of operation for 150 years. So the founders kind of noticed that, first of all, when you take this glass slide and you do nothing with it, but quickly do the diagnosis, while the pathologist has learned a lot from this, figured things out, he then, puts this away on a shelf somewhere and it sits there forever, right? So that knowledge, that gold that's sitting in that data is never transferred to anybody else. So the first thing you start thinking about is the value of digitization. There's just so many derivative values of it. But one of the things is that there's so much gold in those pixels, so much gold in that data that we're not using, not leveraging, is kind of the first place they thought would bring a lot of value to customers. So I think in terms of what the revolution here is digitizing pathology, bringing a layer of data to the entire platform, being able to make that data easily available across that platform. And then building out, variations of that platform, if you will. So products specifically for domains like life sciences, and starting in biomedical research, pharma research, and also building out products that are for the clinical side, the diagnostic clinical side, where it's human tissue and you're diagnosing someone's cancer or not. So that's how you revolutionize this, and it takes a platform. Just building a single product, would not make it. You have to think big and you have to think platform. So that's kind of the founder's vision, really.
Yeah. So, tell me, what does it mean to you to go from a platform versus a product? Like, what do those two differentiate? How do you differentiate that? Because some people will say like, oh, we're building a platform for this, but really they just have a product. They haven't expanded that out yet. So how do you differentiate that?
So I'd say typically, a product would be a single element or in launch that you have in a specific marketplace that does specific workflow. So it's built for one single workflow. What I consider a platform is an enabler of multiple products in multiple marketplaces, multiple workflows, if you will. So that's how I differentiate a platform versus a single, product, a siloed product.
Yeah. So like, going to a podcast, let's talk about podcasts as an example. Maybe you have a product that is your recording software, but if you want to have a platform, you have a digital asset management behind it that tags it, puts meta tags, and has a workflow of releasing it, keeps analytics or whatever.
That's right. Shareable data with others, right? You might make the data available from the podcast, the metadata, and the podcast itself, so that AI algorithms can learn from it and go pick it up in recommender systems, right? So when someone's searching for something, they go, oh, you know what? I like this, Geek Leader podcast. Let me look at it, right? Maybe it comes up at the top of the search list. So really enabling all of that, through that platform as opposed to just the product, which is a recording.
Yeah. So when you're going from a product to a platform, I'm sure there's a lot of management things that have to be thought about, and a lot of things that have to be planned out. You can't just kind of, a lot of people will try. They'll just bolt on features and features and features and try to create this, but a lot of times that doesn't work out very well. How do you go about planning something like this?
See, that's a great question. And that was my first challenge at Proscia. So when I was brought in, again, the mission was, scale out our platform. That was a mission. Now the founders had already established what I called a version 1.0 of the product in the life sciences market. It was doing well. Now the question is, how do you scale that vertically? So as you said correctly, you want to make that product scale. So you want to add more features. You want to make sure that the workflows are better in the marketplace. But then now you also want to get to related spaces and expand that outreach to other markets, to other customers, other products, if you will. So the first thing I started thinking about is, as I build out my organization, I want to make sure that we build out the organization in a way to have a common core team, if you will, that focuses on the common elements of the entire platform. So, John, you asked about pathology. What does it sort of comprise of? Let's take an enterprise pathology system. What it would have in it? The components it would have in it. Some of the components in that would be an image ingestion part. So where you're bringing in the pixels. So you basically have these glass slides. You throw them on scanners, and now you have a pipeline that brings those pixels in. And so that's, you have an image pipeline that comes in. That's the first part of it. A second part of it would be your API networking layer. So again, to contrast pathology versus radiology, the size of your images in pathology typically are 10 to 20 times that of radiology. You just gotta pause and think about that. So the second challenge you have is the API networking layer. And you and I are both from a networking background, so we can appreciate that, how difficult it is to bring these pixels in a performative way to the third part, which is your workflow, your viewer, and the dashboard you're looking at. So now you're looking at something, let's say a pathologist is looking at a dashboard workflow for their day-to-day work. They click on the images. They want to basically manipulate the images, do annotations on it, do kind of different workflow elements to it, right? And then you also want to call AI for assistance. You click a button, AI comes in and goes, hey, let me tell you, I think this is a melanoma. This is something else, right? It gives you all of these insights. So my first thing was to look at the common elements. So let me go after these common elements. How do we build a team of experts who basically just work on those common core elements? The first one was a team that's just focused around digital image management. That's all they do. They understand how to bring in images, manipulate those, work with them, and then, have them ready for serving to the API team. And the API and the networking team takes over. Their job is to pull these pixels out as ordered by the front end and bring them performatively to the front end, right? And then there's a third team that's a set of other teams. I shouldn't say just the third team, but other set of teams that are now basically using these services. So they're basically customers of these services, these common core services, and each of these are now product lines for their domain. So there's a life sciences group that uses these services and builds out a product that's for the life sciences biopharma industry. Similarly, there's a diagnostic clinical product that uses these common elements now that I described here to build a product now for the diagnostic clinician, right? So that's another one. And third one would be a data group, for example, a data team that's now building out a data product to enable other applications for, again, practitioners who are consuming that data. So those are the things, again, as you said, how do you distinguish a platform versus these products? So I had to build it deliberately to make sure there's a common core platform that then services these other products. And that's how I build my Scrum teams.
Oh, so I definitely want to get into that in just a second. But going into like some of the things from a, you talked about the diagnosis part of it, and you also mentioned AI. And I wonder, are you guys getting to the point where you're using AI to help rapidly diagnose things quickly and like flag things, to make it a little bit quicker? I know I've heard about this with, rad tech, that they can spot things a lot quicker with AI than in humans, but you still need that oversight. Where are we when it comes to, pathology?
So I think pathology is going to be the same. So I think you want to assist. So I think the role of AI, the way I see it in pathology, is going to be as a co-pilot. I think to steal that phrase, basically, it's a co-pilot that helps you reduce the mundane. So for instance, quality checking the output from a scanner. Again, is that something a human needs to do? Probably not. A machine can probably look at that and go quickly saying it's blurry, or, looks like we didn't get all the tissue here, or something's wrong with the scan. Those are things that basically an AI algorithm can definitely do. There are other things that, definitely algorithms can assist. Someone who's a pathologist, radiologist that you brought up, for example, in radiology, it is common to have an assistant. Basically, they kind of maybe prioritize cases for you that says, hey, these are the ones you should be looking at. These are the ones that we definitely have a diagnosis for. These are the ones in the middle, and these are the ones that we really want to prioritize for you to, have a look at as a physician. So I think it's all of the above. AI is just emerging in this field, and one of the things, again, in building this platform, it comes back to the platform theme, is we obviously cannot, work on curing all cancers, or basically being able to diagnose all cancers with AI algorithms on our own, right? We just cannot. There are more than 100 plus types of cancer diagnosis, if you will, out there. We rely on being the best platform that we can integrate anybody's AI algorithm. So again, the part of the vision here is to build a platform that's scalable and a platform that people can bring their own algorithms to, right? So we don't have to do everything on our own. We have an AI team that does its own, builds out our own, homegrown AI algorithms, but we also work with the industry. We don't just close walled our platform. We make sure it's open. We make sure that our APIs are written in a way that it engages others to bring their products to our platform, including their AI products. So that's a very important part of the platform vision, which is making sure a system is open.
Yeah. So you mentioned the Scrum teams before. I want to hit on that a little bit, because if you have a Scrum team for each product, and then you probably, I guess you have a Scrum team for that core services that you're producing for those products, do you have some type of communication between those, like a Scrum of Scrums or something like that everybody gets to get together on or communicate? And how challenging is that?
Yeah, exactly, John. So I think you're hitting on Conway's Law, right?
Yes. So if you don't mind, for people that aren't aware of what that is, can you tell us about Conway's Law? What is that? Because it's one of those things where you said, when we were talking about this before the show, I was thinking in my head, I was like, I haven't heard that, a while. I need to go back and make sure I understand this.
It's still very valid, John. So, to paraphrase very simply what Conway essentially said is, be careful about the organization you build, because your code patterns will essentially follow your organizational patterns.
Yes.
So what that means is, if you build very siloed teams from an organizational perspective, your code's going to be siloed. Yeah. And what that means essentially is that these individual products will not benefit from that communication across the aisle. They will not benefit from other people's mistakes, right? Someone else has built this module, somebody else, they made all the mistakes they had to make. They've got a great version of this out there. They don't get to leverage it. They make their own mistakes. And then imagine at the end of this funnel, maintainability. You're now going to have to maintain 3, 4, 5 versions of the same module, right? And that each team is written slightly differently. So it doesn't make sense. So reversing Conway's Law basically means you break down those silos. So the deliberate act of creating even this core platform group already forces people to interface with each other. It forces people to kind of go, I'm going to, instead of me writing this thing on my own, I'm going to go to the core team. I'm going to talk to the, leader of that team. I'm going to talk to the product manager for that team. And I'm going to kind of say, hey, can you build this out for us, right? These are requirements that we have coming up in the future. So they give them a heads up. But now they're basically communicating their core team. Now, the core team also does something else, which is by its very nature, it's trying to serve as many product lines as possible. So naturally, what happens is the core product manager, the core team lead, technical team lead, liaises with other products. And he goes out there and says, hey, this other group is asking me for this. I'd be surprised if you guys don't need this. And they go, oh my God, we'd be delighted to have this. And in fact, we've got this other version we're using that's terrible. It was homegrown. We built it ourselves. But we'd like to have a much more, performative version, a scalable version, whatever have you, right? So this, just by the very foundational part of creating an organization deliberately that has a common core, communication starts, right? So even without having a Scrum of Scrums, even without having any of those processes, you start to have this develop very naturally. And in fact, it's a lot more robust. In this day of Slack channels, you can see Slack, people just communicating quickly across Slack, saying, hey, I just heard this from the diagnostic team. What do you think? Life sciences team, do you need this? And they go, oh my God, yes. In fact, 6 months back, a customer asked for this. How do you go about this? And when do you think it'll be available? The one thing, John, we did realize was that, as you said, communication is important, and that we saw a flurry of activity, people moving back and forth. The other thing that was interesting was we did find a reason, even though this common core team doesn't face the market directly, they're not hitting customers directly, their customers are internal, we found the need to have a proper product manager assigned to that. So that was interesting. That was one of the insights we had, is that when the technical team was doing the work, they were doing a decent job of communicating, but they were having a hard time prioritizing. What do I do first? What do I do as second? And we found that having a product manager had their perspective on all those product lines was able to bring that, order to the core team there. So it was one of the insights in terms of organizational structure, communication patterns. That was very helpful. And the product manager also serves an additional role, which is the one you brought up, which is a communication role. Yeah. They're also responsible now for the robust communication between the teams, between the product managers, encouraging that just by design. So be careful how you choose your org, because it'll drive your code patterns, basically.
Yeah, so when you talk about having that product manager, I guess they're building their product as that core set of services for their customers, more or less, or going to be the product development team for each of the product lines. Right. Yes. Okay. And how important is transparency for your teams? Because I know a lot of times people will say, oh, if we're going to be a Scrum purist, we need, that Scrum team to be perfectly transparent, but all of their information is going to come up to the product manager, product owner, or whatever. but it sounds like you guys are talking across the lines a lot.
We do. And that is by design. So we never want to discourage that. We want to absolutely encourage robust dialogue. We want to actually share earlier. We want to share often. We want to share very transparently. What we do is where product comes in for us is that prioritization piece. So product doesn't get in the way of that communication, engineer to engineer. You can never beat that, right? Because also engineers find better ways to do something when they start having that discussion among each other. They go, oh, this is it. I can do this much easier if I do it this way as opposed to, some other way there. And I think part of that dialogue is also help the product managers get up to speed with the tech stack. So they get savvier with the tech stack. Engineers are able to then, break down things better for the product manager for prioritization. But yeah, we encourage that dialogue. We encourage that robust, transparency and the action, right? And I think, John, the proof is in the pudding. So here is the thing that happened with Proscia. So I've been here about 3 years now, and two things happened to us. I'd say a few things happened to us. So we did launch our diagnostic product. As I said, we started off in life sciences. In life sciences, my first mission was scale that up vertically, make sure we had features and capabilities. And today, Proscia is proud to have 14 out of the top 20 biopharma companies as a customer. Right? So customers are the name brands of the name brands, which is very exciting. That's one thing. Second thing is we did launch our diagnostic clinical product for, again, the clinical industry. And we got CE European IVDR certified first. So we got our CE mark in Europe. And just last week, we got some exciting news from the FDA saying that we are also cleared by the FDA now. So you can just imagine the 3-year journey, proof is in the pudding. These are the outcomes of building your organization in the right way ultimately for a platform.
So how important is it to you? You mentioned the word outcomes. I love that word. To focus on the outcomes versus the effort and the other parts of it. How important is it to celebrate those outcomes too?
It is huge. And again, you brought upon another thing, which is you have to absolutely be in celebration mode as you see these, small wins, sometimes big wins. There are the big wins, of course, but there are also small wins. And pretty much what we do is with every single sprint, typically sprints are 2-week kind of, runs. We run for about 2 weeks, and then we do a sprint review. At those sprint reviews, I like celebrating the little wins, right? Hey, we brought a new API to the marketplace. Hey, we've done another format, image ingestion format that we're dealing with or something else. These are very important to celebrate as a team. Of course, at the leadership level, you typically, a company announces the big wins, so the big outcomes, you do celebrate that. But it's as important to show the journey towards those big outcomes. But I think outcomes matter. You want to focus on outcomes because that helps prioritization, not only at that product management level, but even at the engineering level. I basically bring it up to my engineers that you have to know your roadmap inside out. You have to know your business inside out too. Not just good enough to say I write my code and I kind of go home, I do my thing. You have to know your business. It's very important. So a lot of the folks that we have here, we try to get as much domain expertise as possible, and that is precious. That to me is something that you cannot shortcut. You have to build that domain expertise there. And what happens then is that an engineer themselves can make a priority call. And they can go to the product manager saying, you know what, I think this would be better than this because of this reason. And product would be like, of course, I love that idea, right? So that's how you build, I think, a strong team here. But that's a great point too. The outcomes focus does that for you.
So how do you go about developing the domain knowledge for a really strong engineer? Maybe you bring an engineer over that's never worked in healthcare or anything like that, and you want to build their domain knowledge. How do you go about that? Because I've had times where, I've worked in the TV industry, and it's really important to have someone that understands TV. You can have a really good developer, but if they don't understand, streaming quality and digital rights management, things like that, it's a long learning curve. So how is it that you go about doing that?
It is a long learning curve. So I think first of all, you got to recognize that, and you got to be patient with your team. There are a couple of things that we do very well here. One is, of course, you want the engineer to get, their hands on keyboard, start working right away, building out their stories. But as we do this, we have a couple of disciplines that we follow here. I have, for example, every quarter, I do a quarterly business review with my engineering team. Right? Okay. So why do I do that? I kind of bring to them at the leadership level on a quarterly basis, a retrospective. What did we do looking back? How did the things that they build bring value to the business? So we talk about that. Second thing is during that conversation, we also talk about the details of the customer application. So our customers using this. So for instance, in the biopharma world, our customers actually using our product for identifying unique biomarkers for cancer. Right? What is that? I bring a couple of papers to the table, a couple of simple links that people can read. So I provide them with some content they can go back and read on their own. So we do that on a quarterly basis. Third thing is, I also encourage people to talk to people across the aisle. So we've got experts in the company who've got long tenure domain capability. Sometimes we do a simple webinar internally. We'll do just a webinar focused on the diagnostic product, saying, hey, let's talk about how customers use this. We have chief medical officers. Sometimes we, maybe have a Q&A session with them. But over time, the engineers start to develop that appreciation. So then what happens is they start coming up with ideas themselves to the product manager. And that delights the product manager, saying, oh my God, it just made my life easier because I was struggling with these 3 challenges from the customers. But the engineer intuitively already understands that. It doesn't have to ask 1,000 questions on why is this important. So that's kind of how you do it. It takes time. So again, you have to be patient. So once you build those long tenured engineers, you then have to make sure you retain those engineers. So that's the other challenge as VP of engineering, to make sure that you got people continuously energized, they're learning and growing, but they're also building the domain expertise on top of it.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Now, I love what you're saying about how engineers can bring their own ideas, and that's that's always been the most refreshing part of my management is when somebody that works for me, that's writing code all day, and they say, hey, going back to my time at an internet service provider, it was back then, it was the early 2000s. It was really frustrating to get a cable modem installed at your house, or something like that, because you had to call, you couldn't do it online. You had to schedule. They would look up your address to see what speeds you were available in your area. He's like, if I can just do this online and knew my options before I called, it'd be a lot easier. Okay. And I said, well, we have all that data. We can easily create a service to do that, and then we can take that to the next step. And it's one of those things that engineers, if we use your product or they talk to someone who's used your product, they can see the pain points that customers are experiencing and bring those ideas.
Absolutely. And that value creation, I think, comes from that healthy dialogue between business leaders and technical leaders, and that dialogue between them. Agreed.
So you mentioned one of the challenges is keeping employees happy and keeping them motivated and excited and keeping and retaining them to your business, because a lot of times when you build someone up and they get to a point where they're hard to keep, right? They get expensive, or they get burned out sometimes, or they're really good, so people are coming out trying to pluck them from your group and take them somewhere else. How do you go about keeping people motivated and excited about working for you?
So I'll share a very simple discussion I had with an employee when I joined the company about 3 years back, joined Proscia 3 years back. He basically came to me after a couple of weeks and he said, listen, I've been here quite some time now and I really want to leave Proscia. I want to go do something else. I said, you know what? Sure, there's probably a valid reason why you want to leave. Can you sit down with me and tell me, why are you leaving? And he talked to me about the things that motivated him. He says, one thing is, I want to grow to become a senior engineer, right? That's number one. Second thing is, I want to also be sort of game-changing to a team. So I want to be the guy that is able to, come up with fresh ideas, but is able to influence the business. That's the second thing I want. Third thing is, I don't want to modestly grow my compensation year over year. And he said, I would be interested in, Proscia stock options. So he said, certainly we're a startup. I don't, by compensation, I don't mean cash. I also mean stock options. So I sat down and said, okay, how about this? Let me come back to you with a plan. So don't make any moves right now. Let me come back to you with a plan. So a couple of weeks later, I sat down with the same engineer and I gave him a plan. And he said, how about if I did these things for you? For instance, I'm looking to seed a new team, right? So again, as a platform approach, I'm going to be building out this platform. You're on one side of the fence. I want to actually seed it with somebody with your seniority who's had 3-4 years of experience, bring you to the other side. You've got some domain expertise here that's transferable to that domain. Let me go build you up there and let's see how you do. And along with that, you will grow as you grow and contribute to the team. Naturally, we'll make sure that you're compensated adequately too, both in terms of options and maybe a cash component too. And guess what? Engineer stayed, enjoyed his journey, and, sort of grew out to be a senior engineer in the new team and just loved it. He's loving it since. So I think that's the kind of engagement that you have to talk individually to team members. And you want to get this dialogue going before someone has already picked up the phone, recruiters call them, they're already engaged with them. And once you start to have those candid conversations, the engineers start to think, oh my God, the company cares for me, the leadership cares for me. I can bring a lot to the table here. I can bring value and the company can derive value from me. It's a two-way street ultimately, right? So I think it's that. It's identifying your employees that, are at some risk, and you can tell, having that dialogue, having those board conversations early, and then, actually fending this off at the pass, if you will.
No, I think that's great. I love the fact that you not only just listened to them, but actually took action and found a place, to let that person grow and develop their skills. And, obviously if they did a good job there, they were compensated for, that growth.
Exactly. And, again, you have that honest dialogue saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do on the other side of the fence. Are you up for it? And this individual was a top performer. He's like, oh my God, that would be phenomenal, Krishna. I'd love to do that. And people did very well.
So where do you see, this path going for you guys in the future? Like, how do you see, what's next in your product development, platform development lane?
Absolutely. So I think one of the things that we're starting to think about now is, we want to be the platform where data lives and where work gets done, right? So we're already starting to get that from the product perspective. We've now got a platform that serves products. These products are where work gets done. And work gets done in these. There's a lot of data generated, right? How do you unlock value from that data? For instance, it would be amazing if you can imagine where someone in the biopharma side has identified some very unique therapies for a specific biomarker in cancer. And so they kind of go, hey, if somebody has this biomarker and these, particular indications, this therapeutic medicine or process would be amazing for them. And then just imagine if that data exists on the clinical diagnostic side where a patient pops up, exactly those biomarkers. And now you want to match those. You want to match that patient, immediately with the therapy. So I think there's a revolution in personalized medicine, early treatment, interventional medicine that's coming up in the future that Proscia is going to be at the center of. So I'm excited to just be a part of it.
Yeah, and maybe even looking back, like if you have the data, someone may have had, a biopsy 2 years ago and they were given one treatment type, and then we find out later, they're still going through that treatment, but we found out later that there's something better out there. You can go back and say, boom.
Yeah. Exactly. It's game changing. I think this is, to me, as we break down these data silos and we connect up, you can imagine radiology, pathology data. People call this multi-omics data, from different domains, proteomics, and all kinds of, data that essentially an oncologist can look at and go, oh my God, you know what? There is this new therapy lying out there that I know of research-wise that can really revolutionize this patient's life. So let's bring the therapy to the patient. So exactly right. So I think these are the things that are just starting to emerge. And I think, John, you brought up AI on top of that. AI is going to basically allow for acceleration of some of that, right? So it's an enabler. There's always got to be a smart human somewhere in this loop. There's got to be somebody making that decision. But at the end of the day, AI can remove those obstacles, make it simpler, make the workflow easier. Those are the things that AI can bring to the table. So I think that's what's in it for Proscia. Continue to build out the platform, but we're at the early stages of it. We're still building on our platform, scaling it, being able to offer multiple product lines from it, and being able to make this data available easily across that platform.
Yeah, and we talked about AI. Yeah, there's always going to have to be a human in there, at least for the time being. And Microsoft did a fantastic job branding it as Copilot. Yes,
I think that's brilliant marketing, exactly right there, because it is a Copilot. When for example, we use Copilot with some of our developers use them, within their IDs, their development environments, if you will. Visual Studio Code is what we use, and it's right there. Copilot's right there, helping you, assisting you. Jury's still out on exactly how perfectly effective it is, but at a minimum, it's like code completion. At a minimum, it gives you a few hints. It
helps you get started sometimes too. I know sometimes we're like, I have an idea, but I don't know how to get started. And give me a framework, give me an outline.
Yeah, give me an outline. It does it very well for you. That's exactly right. That's where it's really, really, very effective. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, it sounds like Proscia is a great place to work, and you guys are doing some amazing things. So that's awesome. How can people connect with you online, learn more about what you guys are doing, and just find out more?
So I think people can visit Proscia.com, and that's our website to learn a little bit more about what we do. If you want to connect with me personally, LinkedIn.com is the best way to reach out to me. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and I'll add that link to your LinkedIn profile as well as the link to Proscia on the show notes at geekleader.com so people can click through there. And again, it's been a great conversation, Krishna. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Likewise, John. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to geekleader.com to learn more about what this guest is up to, click on their links, and connect with them online. I would also greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. And make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave me a tip by going to geekleader.com/tip.